The first time it happened, the moon was high and cold, and the barn doors creaked like they were trying to scream. She didn't know what was happening at first. She had been asleep, her small body curled into itself on the scratchy mat near the hearth. The heat from the embers had lulled her into a dreamless rest, until rough fingers gripped her arm and dragged her into the night. No words. No explanation. Just the cold rush of air against her thin shift, and then the shift gone, torn away and tossed aside like something unclean. Her stepmother's breath was sour with millet beer, her face hard as bark. Behind the barn the cowhide waited, slick and foul in the dark. "Lie down," the woman ordered. She hesitated. Her feet sunk slightly into the muddy patch where the barn's shadow fell, and her heart pounded against her ribs. But the woman's hand pushed her down hard, and her back hit the hide with a sickening slap. It was cold. Not just cold, it was alive with stink. With damp. With something wrong. She didn't scream. Not then. Screaming never worked. That first night, she lay curled on her side, arms wrapped around her belly, shivering as the hide seeped into her pores. It smelled like something that had died twice. The salt from when it was tanned still clung to the leather and crystals, jagged like sand in her spine. The wetness crept into her hair. The slime of old blood soaked into her skin. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed, laughter echoed, then silence. She cried into her hands so no one would hear. In the morning she was allowed to come back in, not through the front door like a human being but through the back like a stray goat. Her knees wobbled. Her toes were numb. Her skin itched and stank. When her stepmother saw her standing there, she only spat near her feet and said, "Go wash. You're smelling like your mother again." Her mother. The beast. That's what they all called her. Her step-siblings, 2 boys and 1 older girl, snickered whenever they passed her. "Beast daughter," they whispered. "Cow blood." One day the girl clapped her hand over her nose and said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "She smells like where she came from, like death and dung." She was 8 and she had stopped asking why. Her father, once gentle in voice, had turned into something hollow. When he looked at her, his eyes passed through her like she was air. When he spoke, it was only to ask for silence. "Don't disturb the peace," he'd murmur. "Don't make trouble." But wasn't she the one being disturbed? Wasn't this trouble already? Every night it was the same. After the house had quieted, after the oil lamp was snuffed out and the little ones were asleep, her stepmother would come. No light. No sound. Just a hand yanking her up, pulling her out, stripping her down to the skin. Sometimes the woman muttered things, curses, prayers, memories. Your mother never learned. Always wild. Always stubborn. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes she pressed her down harder, grinding her shoulder into the hide until she thought her bones would break. The cowhide changed every few days but never for something clean. If one grew too dry, her stepmother soaked it in water from the trough, making sure it stayed wet and stinking. Sometimes maggots danced along the edges, white and wriggling. Once there was a patch of green mold the size of her face. And still she lay on it. Still she bore it. Her body changed. Not in the way children grow, but in the way something gets used to filth. Her skin always smelled, no matter how much she scrubbed. The other children at the village well refused to draw water after her. "You'll rot the rope," one boy shouted, pushing her aside. She sat alone in school, her books damp from the sweat and stink that clung to her like a second skin. Her teacher gave her cloth to sit on so the bench wouldn't reek. No one looked her in the eye. She learned to be small. To move without sound. To hold her breath when others passed too close. And yet, no matter what she did, the scent followed. The punishment followed. Once, when her father was walking past the barn, he saw her being laid out. She saw him, just for a second, saw his eyes flash to hers, saw the flicker of something like shame. But then he turned. Walked on. Didn't stop. Didn't speak. The next morning he left early for the market, came home late, never looked her way. That night the cowhide was colder than ever. It had rained and the hide sucked in the moisture until it was like lying on a living tongue. Her teeth chattered so loud she bit her tongue to stop them. Blood pooled in her mouth. She swallowed it. Years passed like that, slow, sticky, silent. She counted time in hides. In smells. In the way her back bent slightly from trying to curl away from the cold. She stopped crying. She stopped asking. There were no more questions inside her, only layers of stink like sediment pressed deep. She imagined her body as a pit. Dark. Unreachable. One night she asked the cowhide itself in a voice so low it was barely breath, "Why me?" The hide didn't answer. But the wind blew stronger than usual, rattling the roof. Something shifted in the barn. The animal stirred. A goat bleated once, then fell silent. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. She looked up at the sky and felt something stir. Not hope. Not yet. But something else. A tremor in the bones. A warmth in her chest that didn't belong there. The beginning of an end, maybe. Or the end of a beginning. The cowhide was the same. But she wasn't. Not entirely. Not anymore. By the time the first rooster crowed, her back was already blistered. The welts rose like angry vines, twisted and hot across her skin. Some had cracked open. Others throbbed. The stench clung to her, thick and sour, the smell of wet hide, mildew and something deeper, something that lived now in her flesh. Her dress stuck to her back, and when she peeled it off to wash, pieces of cloth tore away with dried blood. She didn't scream. Not anymore. Pain had become a language she no longer resisted, only listened to. She washed at the stream before anyone else could come. But even the water flinched. Frogs leapt away when her feet touched the bank. Fish darted beneath the rocks. The lather from her soap refused to foam, as if even it rejected her. Still she scrubbed. She scrubbed until her skin burned again. Then she sat in the sun, hoping the warmth would dry her before the flies found her. They always did. They came in clouds now, not single buzzes. They danced along her back and arms, perched on her ears, hovered above her head like a crown of decay. At first she tried to swat them, but they returned in greater numbers. So she let them stay. Let them drink. Let them name her. It was one of the village boys who said it first. She was walking back from the stream when she passed a group of children playing with bottle caps and sticks. One of them sniffed the air and laughed. "Oh, do you day come," he said, pointing. The others turned, eyes wide, then pinched their noses. "Oh, do you," they cried in chorus. "Oh, do you. Oh, do you." She didn't understand at first. She thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they meant something else. But then her stepsister walked by, smirking, and said, "It suits you." "What do you?" The stink. The name spread faster than flies. Faster than rumor. It stuck harder than rot. At school her name was erased from the attendance list. The teacher, who once called her Ada, now simply glanced at the back of the room and muttered, "ODU is here." That was when she was still allowed inside. Eventually she was made to sit outside on a stool just beneath the window. "It's for the health of the others," the headmistress said. "You understand." She did not. But she nodded. While the others sat on smooth desks and copied from the chalkboard, she traced her own lessons in the dust beside her. She pressed her fingers into the earth and shaped letters she no longer believed would matter. When she raised her hand to ask questions, the teacher didn't see. Or pretended not to. Sometimes she spoke anyway, and every time she did, someone inside the class covered their nose or coughed or whispered, "Oh, do you stop breathing." Even silence became a curse. The flies didn't mind the quiet. They grew bold in it. One girl screamed when a fly from ODU's head landed on her own book. "I'll catch her sickness," she cried. "The stink is crawling." From then on the children sat farther apart. She wasn't allowed near the water tap. Her cup was labeled and left outside. Her books were kept separate. She wasn't beaten, not like before, but it was worse. The beatings were private. The shame now was public. She walked with her arms at her sides, elbows pressed close to trap the smell. She taught herself to breathe shallow, to move slow so as not to stir the air. She chose paths that curved against the wind, avoided spaces where people stood close together. If she saw a group ahead, she waited. If someone passed behind, she stepped aside. Still, the name followed her like a chant, soft but persistent. At home things were no better. Her stepmother no longer needed to strip her each night. The stench had settled in, it had become part of her. "The hide did its work," the woman said, satisfied. "Now you carry your shame for all to see." Her father remained silent. Always silent. She no longer looked for him in the crowd. No longer checked his eyes for pity. His eyes had nothing for her. Not even absence. Just blankness, like looking into the base of an extinguished lantern. Her step-siblings held their noses whenever she entered the room. The youngest once threw up when she passed too close. Her stepbrother put salt around his doorway and told her she was a demon. Her stepsister smeared ash across her face and told the neighbors it was for protection. "ODU lives with us," she'd whisper, voice trembling just enough to sound real. "She's cursed. Something from her mother's blood. Something rotten." The neighbors began to murmur. They avoided the house. The market women raised prices when she approached. The church women refused her offerings. One pastor, visiting from another town, placed a hand on her head and recoiled. "The spirit is not clean," he said. "There is mourning in her breath." She stopped speaking altogether. It made things easier. If they couldn't hear her, maybe they'd forget she was human. Maybe she could disappear without leaving. But the flies never forgot. They came every night. The moment her sweat broke, they arrived, humming low, patient, hungry. They tasted her before anyone else. Named her first, before the children, before the teachers, before the village. They knew what she carried. They knew what had been rubbed into her skin. The cowhide had been more than just leather. It had been memory, binding, curse. She learned to live inside herself. To make her body a box locked tight. When it hurt, she folded the pain away. When the shame rose, she swallowed it like stone. There were places inside her now that no one could enter, not even the flies. One evening, while walking back from the stream, a woman with a baby passed her on the path. The baby began to cry, squirming in her mother's arms. "Hush," the woman muttered. "She won't touch you. It's just Odiu. Just Odiu." She stopped in the middle of the path, the weight of that word pressing into her chest. She didn't remember what her real name sounded like anymore. She tried to mouth it. Her lips moved, but nothing came. Later that night, lying on the mat beside the hearth, she whispered into the dark, "Odiu." Not with hate. Not with anger. Just to hear what it felt like. Just to see if it still meant her. The flies answered. They landed gently on her arms, her legs, her cheeks. Their wings buzzed in harmony. They moved like a second skin, their tiny feet tapping a language she hadn't yet learned to understand. She closed her eyes and let them speak. Let them name her. Let them stay. It started slowly, the way all terrible things do, just a whisper of change beneath the surface. First, her pores stopped sweating. At school, other children wiped their brows during the heat, fanned themselves with torn books and scratched at their chests. But she stayed dry. Bone dry. Her skin no longer glistened. It felt sealed. Like something trapped under thin stone. When she ran, as she sometimes did, to avoid the teasing, the spit, the rocks thrown by smaller boys, her lungs heaved but her body stayed dry. Not a bead of sweat. Not a drop. The teacher, who still wouldn't let her inside, said it was unnatural. Even the cursed should sweat, she muttered. Her scalp followed. The oil that once made her hair soft and dark disappeared. Her hair grew brittle, cracked at the roots, snapped in her fingers like old straw. She tried to braid it but it flaked away, falling into her lap in tiny dull clumps. Her stepmother called it justice. Her stepsister said she looked like a scarecrow. One day, someone smeared palm oil across her scalp in the schoolyard, hoping to soften the devil. It didn't work. It just added a new rancid layer to the stink. No matter how she scrubbed, the smell stayed. She used ash. She used lye. She crushed bitter leaves and rubbed them under her arms, between her legs, under her breasts where the skin had begun to toughen and darken like stretched leather. Nothing helped. The stream knew her now. It whispered things when she approached. The water parted before her feet touched it. Frogs sank deep. Fish vanished. Even her own reflection wavered as if it refused to look back. She tried diving in once, sinking low, holding her breath beneath the current, letting it fill her ears, her mouth. When she emerged, she thought something might have changed. It hadn't. She went home dripping, and the flies welcomed her back like old friends. She didn't dry herself. She let the water evaporate slowly and felt the stink rise fresh and sharp again, warmed by the sun. She began to lose track of days. Not because she forgot, she remembered everything. The cold, the sting, the names. But because each day was so much like the last that time folded in on itself. She moved through it like someone underwater. Her body no longer felt like hers. Her skin itched constantly, and when she scratched, flakes came off, gray, dead, curling like the bark of a sick tree. Her nails cracked. Her joints stiffened. It was as though the cowhide she slept on had crawled into her blood and began remaking her. Sometimes, when she lay flat on her belly behind the barn, her face turned to the side, she imagined she could feel the hide breathing beneath her. Slow. What? Animal. At first, she told herself it was in her mind, a game she played to keep from crying. But then she began to feel its warmth. The hide was never warm before. She knew that hide. She had memorized every wrinkle in its surface, every stain, every hard edge of salt that still clung to it after all these months. It used to feel cold and alien. Now, it pulsed faintly beneath her like a sluggish heartbeat. Sometimes, it twitched under her hip or shoulder like something stretching in sleep. She didn't know what that meant. But she began to speak to it. Not loud, never loud. Just whispers. Whispers she wasn't even sure were hers. She told it her dreams, dreams where the breeze smelled like nothing at all, clean and wide and invisible. She told it about a place where skin was just skin, and people walked without leaving trails of stink behind them. She told it she used to have a name before Odiu. She didn't remember the sound of it, only the shape it made in her mother's voice. A name said with laughter. With love. That was all gone now. Sometimes in the night, after her stepmother had left and the moon lit the patch of dirt behind the barn, she would press her face into the hide and cry without tears. Her eyes had dried up. All that remained was the sound, thin, cracked, barely human. And then one night the hide moved. Not a twitch. Not a pulse. It rose. Beneath her, the surface shifted, slow and careful, as though something massive stirred under the earth. She froze. Her breath hitched. She placed her palms flat against the leather, certain she'd gone mad. But it moved again. The hide lifted slightly and then settled back with a wet sigh. She whispered, "Are you listening?" And in the stillness she felt a hum rise through her arms, through her chest, like a sound too deep for ears, like the part of thunder that lives in the ground. It wasn't a word, but it wasn't silence either. It was acknowledgement. She didn't sleep that night. She lay still listening. The flies did not land. The breeze did not blow. Even the goats in the barn stayed silent. The world pressed against her skin, and the cowhide beneath her pulsed again, steady now. Steady like breath. The next day something changed. Her stepmother came to drag her out as usual but froze. "What have you done?" she whispered. Her stepsister peeked from behind the barn and ran screaming back into the house. Her father didn't come out at all. Odiu, no, not Odiu now, stood up slowly from the cowhide and walked toward the house. Her feet left dark prints on the earth, like the hide had marked her. She didn't smell worse. She didn't smell better. She didn't smell like anything. And that terrified them. She looked at the woman who had broken her every night and saw her hands tremble. The flies circled in the air but did not land. They flew in slow, reverent spirals as though unsure if they should follow her now. She said nothing. She only walked back behind the barn, lay down again and pressed her cheek to the hide. "I'm listening," she whispered. And the hide replied. The first time it moved without her on it, she thought it was the wind. The cowhide shifted slightly, curling at the corners like something stretching after a long sleep. She was gathering firewood near the barn when she heard it, a dragging sound, soft and wet. She turned and saw the edge of the hide lift, ripple like a pond touched by a fingertip, then settle back flat. The trees were still. No wind. No one else around. She stood very still. The kind of still you learn when you've spent years trying to be invisible. The hide didn't move again. Not then. But that night, when she lay on it again, it wrapped around her a little tighter than usual. Not enough to suffocate. Just enough to hold. The wetness felt warmer. As if something inside the hide recognized her body now, her weight, her shape. As if it was becoming something like a second skin. Her dreams began to change. They had always been strange, full of colors that didn't exist in daylight, full of smells that had no name. But now they became sharper, clearer, almost like memories. She stood in moonlight, naked, always naked, and across from her stood a beast. Not quite a cow, not quite a woman. It had horns like crescent moons and eyes that mirrored her own. Its body was covered in black, matted hair, and its hooves cracked the earth beneath it. But its gaze was calm. Knowing. She didn't fear it. It spoke. Not in words she knew. The language was older than her, older than the village, older than the salt-stained hide beneath her spine. It was the kind of language that didn't need lips or tongues. It rang inside her bones, blooming like heat beneath her sternum. She didn't understand the words, but she knew what they meant. Asterisk, you are not filth. You are not forgotten. You are not only what they say. Asterisk. Each time she dreamed, the beast stepped closer. And each time she awoke more tired, as though her body had traveled far and not returned whole. Her eyes felt heavier. Her hands shook when she carried the water pot. Her breath came slower, like she was breathing through another's lungs. But there was power now too. When her stepmother came near the barn, the cowhide twitched under her in warning. Once it grew hot, hot enough to steam in the night air, and the woman yelped, stumbling backward, muttering a curse under her breath. "You devil child," she spat. "You and that cursed mat." The others kept their distance. Even her step-siblings stopped their sneering chants. Her stepsister once tried to sneak behind the barn at night with a jug of kerosene. She watched from the shadows as the girl lifted the jug, poured a little onto the edge of the hide. The moment the liquid touched the surface, the hide convulsed. The flames never came. Instead, the jug shattered from the girl's hands without being touched. The shards of clay shot upward, slicing her cheek. She screamed and fled. That was the last time any of them came near after dark. Odiu, or whatever was left of the girl once called that, sat on the hide and watched the stars. She no longer feared the wind or the flies or the cold. Her skin no longer cracked. It no longer flaked. It had thickened, yes, grown darker, tighter, but it no longer bled. And when the wind passed over her, it did not recoil. It circled her. As if curious, she began to hear things. Not just in dreams. In waking hours. Birdsong that slowed when she passed. Goats that bleated twice in rhythm when she walked by. Leaves that shifted even when she was still. And always that old language, just beneath the surface of her mind, like a hum in the bones of the world. It was in the drip of the roof, in the creak of wood, in the long silence after a question she dared not ask. It followed her like a second voice, just barely too quiet to catch. One morning she woke up not to pain, not to her stepmother's call, but to the stillness. Something was wrong. The air felt expectant. She sat up slowly, and that's when she saw them. Hoofprints. They surrounded her in a perfect circle, pressed deep into the dirt. Not fresh, not dry. As if they'd just been made by something enormous and deliberate. She touched one. The earth was still warm. The print was too large to be a goat's. Too precise for cattle. The shape of the hoof was wrong. Not split. Smooth. Round like a stamp. Like a seal. She stood, skin tight across her back, and turned in a slow circle. No sounds. The sun had not yet risen. The barn loomed behind her. The trees held their breath. Something had walked around her. Protected her. Marked her. And no cow lived that close. Later, when the villagers walked past the barn and caught a glimpse of her sitting on the hide, unmoving, they made signs against evil. One old woman spat into the dust and whispered, "The skin remembers." No one asked what that meant. No one wanted to. She knew. The hide wasn't just remembering her. It remembered all of them, all the girls before her. All the creatures it once clothed. All the prayers spoken over its death. All the curses carved into its flesh. And now it lived again through her. At night, when the moon was full and high, she lay back on the hide and stared at the sky until the clouds cleared. And sometimes, just before sleep pulled her under, she saw the beast again. Closer now. Breathing. Its horns caught the light. Its eyes burned. "I have not forgotten you," it said. Neither had her skin. The announcement came on a morning thick with heat and the scent of mango blossoms. A bell rang through the village, sharp and urgent. Women stepped out of their homes, dusting flour from their hands. Children ran barefoot through the paths, shouting, "It's coming! It's coming!" The festival of perfume. It was an old tradition, older than most in the village could remember. A week of cleansing and scent, of celebration and pride. Every home was to be scrubbed clean. Every person bathed and perfumed. Men rubbed camphor oil into their chests. Women braided hibiscus petals into their hair. Children wore garlands of lemongrass and basil. And even the animals were washed and marked with white ash to ward off jealousy. For 7 days the village would glow. But not her. When the announcement was made, her stepmother had cackled so loudly it startled the hens. "Oh, she will walk last," she said, eyes gleaming. "Let her drag her stink behind us like a curse, like always." Her step-siblings clapped. "Odiu will chase the flies away from the perfume," one of them jeered. "Let her come like a warning." The days leading up to the festival were filled with music and laughter. Buckets clattered against the well stones. Children shrieked as water poured over their heads. Palm oil was warmed and poured over scalps. Scented herbs soaked in clay pots. The village turned golden with sunlight and promise. Except for her. Her stepmother forbade her from using the water pots. "The stench will infect the whole barrel," she snapped. "You can go to the stream. Or better yet, don't go at all." The stream had become wary of her. The last time she tried to step into its current, the water turned cloudy and the fish vanished. She didn't force it again. She knew her place. On the 5th day her stepmother grew restless. "Not even the flies can stand you now," she muttered. "You'll ruin the parade." So she made a new punishment. She mixed fresh cow dung with ash and goat urine and called it a mask. "Let her wear it so the gods can see what we've suffered," she said. Her stepsister giggled as she dipped her hands into the greenish paste. "Hold her." They pinned her arms. She didn't fight. She had long stopped fighting. She stood still, staring at the horizon as they smeared the foul mixture over her face, into her scalp, across her chest and back. The dung clung to her skin like glue. The scent of rot and excrement rose in waves, thick and choking. "Now," her stepmother said with satisfaction, wiping her hands on her wrapper, "let her walk behind us like a proper curse." That night, she lay on the hide, her body coated in stink, her breath shallow from the heat and shame. But the hide was different. It was trembling. At first it was subtle, just a ripple under her spine. Then it began to pulse. Stronger. Deeper. The air grew dense. The wind shifted. She sat up slowly. Around her, the goats had gone still. The trees rustled without wind. The barn creaked, though nothing touched it. She looked down at the hide. It was peeling. Not from age. Not from decay. From within. The outer layer, slick and stained, began to curl back in strips. Beneath it, something darker shimmered. Not leather. Not flesh. Something alive. It pulsed with a rhythm not her own. She reached out and touched it with trembling fingers. Heat surged into her palm. A memory, no, not hers, flashed through her. A creature galloping through night fields. Horns catching moonlight. Blood dripping from its mouth. Laughter, wild and low, echoing across a hillside. A promise made in a tongue no longer spoken. She gasped and pulled back. The hide pulsed again. Then the voice came. Not the beast's voice from her dreams. A new one. Feminine. Ancient. It came not from outside but from inside the peeling skin beneath her. Asterisk, you are seen. You are claimed. You are not filth. You are mine. Asterisk. She stared at the hide. The dung on her skin began to crack as if rejecting her body. Her skin itched violently. She clawed at her arms and the mixture flaked away in chunks. Steam rose from her shoulders. The stench no longer made her gag. It smelled different now, like smoke. Like something burning beneath the earth. She lay back on the trembling hide, breath shallow. The next morning was the last day of preparation. Everyone gathered in the village square, wrapped in their finest wrappers, necks gleaming with oil and flower chains. Her stepmother stood proudly with her step-siblings, faces painted with indigo and white chalk. The village chief gave the opening blessing. Then came the line-up for the ceremonial walk. When they called her name, they didn't expect her to appear. But she came. She didn't wash. She didn't comb her hair. The cow dung still clung in patches along her arms and chest, but it had hardened like armor. She walked barefoot, silent, and the crowd parted before her. She should have stunk. But the wind that followed her didn't carry rot. It carried heat. Not the sun's heat. Not fire. Something older. A warmth that made the elders fall silent. A breeze that smelled of blood and salt and something sweet, like crushed blossoms left too long in the dark. Her stepmother tried to laugh, but her voice cracked. She stepped aside. The children didn't jeer. They didn't laugh. They watched. She walked last just as promised. But she did not drag. She glided. The wind curved around her body, lifting the loose edge of her cloth, dancing in her wake. The perfume the villagers wore dimmed as she passed, replaced by a scent none of them could name. It clung to their tongues. It settled in their lungs. When she reached the edge of the square, she turned to look back at them all. Her eyes gleamed like wet coal. Her mouth did not move, but still they heard the voice. She walks last, but not behind. That night, no one celebrated. And the cowhide behind the barn split open. The morning of the festival begins with the sound of pounding at the door. Not a knock, but the dull thud of a heavy stick on wood. Her stepmother kicks the mat aside, grabs her by the wrist, and yanks her from the corner where she's curled, the cowhide still wrapped around her like a 6-second skin. It's damp again. It always is. Rain hasn't fallen in days, but it clings to her back with its foul moisture like it was born from her pores. Up. The woman spits. Let them see the beast they've all been whispering about. She's dragged through the house like something dead, and her stepbrother and stepsister laugh as they follow. The boy mimics her limp. The girl pretends to faint from the stench. Their mother beams with pride, rubbing a paste of crushed onions and animal dung in her hands. We'll make sure they smell her from the gate, she says, and begins smearing it over the child's face, her arms, the tender place behind her ears. Let the elders cover their noses. Let the drummers skip their beat. They push her into a basin and dump stale water over her head, but it does nothing to cleanse. It only spreads the scent, fermented, earthy wrong. Her body is slick with old grime and new shame, the cowhide clinging to her shoulders like it too refuses to be left behind. Don't worry, her stepmother mocks as she ties the hide tighter around the child's chest. You'll walk behind everyone else. Maybe they'll think you're the village's warning. By the time they reach the village gates, the sun is high and merciless. Music echoes from the square, drums, flutes, chants sung by children in fresh wrappers. Perfume hangs thick in the air, musk and jasmine and ground orange peel. Everyone glows with oil. Their hair is neat, braided. Anklets chime when they walk. And she? She leaves a trail behind her. Not of footprints but of flies. They rise with her steps and resettle with her stillness. Her name, the one her mother whispered once, is no longer spoken. Even Odu is said with caution now, like it might curse the tongue. They force her to walk alone at the back of the parade. Children turn around and giggle, then whisper to their mothers. Elders shake their heads. A man selling spices makes a joke loud enough for her to hear, something about spirits that forget to die. She keeps her eyes down. She breathes like a stone, heavy, silent, unbending. But the hide is breathing. It shudders faintly across her skin, pulses once near her ribs. She glances down. The corner near her hip twitches like it's alive, as though a muscle tightens beneath it. She stops walking. Her stepmother turns and hisses, "Move!" But the hide shifts again, warmer now. Like fire under a blanket. She doesn't move. The music begins to stutter. She's in the middle of the square now. People are forming a wide circle around her. Someone from the perfume booth yells, "Get her out of here!" The chief's attendant steps forward. Whose child is this? Who allowed her to come like this? Her stepmother hurries forward, feigning helplessness. She's mad, that one. Possessed. She followed us here. She's not right. Laughter stirs in the crowd, cruel, uneasy. But she doesn't hear them anymore. The hide is humming. Not with sound. But with something deeper. Like thunder in the marrow. Like hooves on soil. Her spine straightens. Her arms drop from the twisted knot of shame. The cowhide tightens one last time, then lets go. It slides off her body like a shedding. And the air breaks. The perfume hanging sweet in the sun turns sour in an instant. People cover their noses, but not because of her. Something sharper has taken hold, wild, electric, older than anything in a bottle. The earth beneath her feet trembles just slightly. Not a full quake, a suggestion, a warning. Dust jumps. Anklet still. A child begins to cry. The hide slaps the ground beside her, steaming. Beneath it, the stone of the square is scorched black. She takes a breath. And the smell, the rot, the salt, the old animal decay, is gone. Her skin is dry. Her scalp cool. She smells of ash and something sweet beneath it, not floral but fierce. The scent of something that doesn't ask permission to live. The villagers stare. Noses begin to bleed. Not all, just a few. The chief's cousin. A woman who once threw dirty water on her. The teacher who refused her a seat. Each presses their hands to their faces, eyes wide in confusion and fear. The blood is dark and thick, as though something inside them has ruptured from looking too long. She's not a girl, someone whispers. She's something else. The chief rises from his chair at the head of the square, his fine wrapper brushing the ground. His guards step forward, but none dare to come closer. She takes a step. The drums, forgotten for a moment, start up again, but the rhythm is off. Faster. Panicked. One of the drummers looks down at his fingers and sees they're bleeding too. She walked dry, someone says. She walked out of the stink. No, another replies. The stink walked out of her. Her stepmother tries to grab her arm, tries to pull her back down into shame. But when her fingers touch the child's skin, they blister. The woman screams and falls backward, clutching her burned hand. Blisters rise instantly, white and angry, like she grabbed a cooking pot with bare palms. No one helps her. Even her children step away. The girl, no longer just a girl, does not move. The wind shifts. The same wind she once avoided because it would carry her scent. Now it gathers behind her like a cloak, ruffling the fabric of her tattered wrapper, lifting her hair from her shoulders. There's a sound in that wind. Not music. Not words. But something with rhythm and will. The scent in the air thickens, but it's no longer hers alone. It smells like hide, yes, but also horn. It smells like old gods. Like stormlight on hooves. Who is she? Someone cries. But no one answers. Because suddenly, it's not just her skin that's peeled away. It's theirs. Eyes turn inward. People begin weeping for things they didn't remember they did. One woman sinks to her knees and begins confessing, about a baby she left at the river's edge. A boy clutches his stomach and cries out a name not his own. The hide on the ground twitches. And then, it rises. Not far. Not with magic. It simply stands upright, shaped by air. Its form ripples. Horns grow from shadow. Eyes glimmer in the empty space where the child once slept. And those who once called her Odu, now cannot call her anything at all. They can only watch. She does not run. She does not speak. She only walks forward, bare feet on stone, a dry wind in her wake. And as she moves, petals fall from nowhere, not perfumed petals but wild ones. The kind no one plants. The kind that grow where others fear to step. The hide follows, dragging behind her without strings. It no longer clings to her. It serves her. By the time she exits the square, no one dares breathe too loud. Not even the chief. When she passes through the village gate, the same one they tried to keep her out of, the guards step aside without being asked. One covers his eyes. Another kneels. The scent she leaves behind is not rot. It's memory. And memory never fades. They called for fire as if it had ever been theirs to summon. As if flame would obey the same hands that once forced a child onto rotting skin and laughed at her stench. The villagers screamed of witchcraft with mouths still stained by the fruits of their cruelty. They shoved her forward, a girl who had walked dry through rivers and come out from cowhide smelling of something older than bone. She did not cry. She did not fight. She stood. Her stepmother was the first to speak, spitting on the ground and declaring the old ways violated. No child comes out of leather with the earth shaking beneath her feet. She was born cursed. Her mother died cursed. And now she brings the curse to us. The village chief hesitated. He had been among those who had turned away when she sat alone during lessons. Among those who once made her sit by the refuse pile while the other children recited verses. Now the sight of her, upright, unashamed, her eyes reflecting the moonlight like polished obsidian, made his tongue heavy. Still he nodded. The fire pit was dug anew, wide and deep. They poured dry wood in, not from trees but from the sacred fig, a tree meant for fertility rites. The irony was not lost on the girl. She said nothing as they dragged her by the arms. Her feet did not resist, though the soil hummed under her toes as if uncertain. As if it wanted to open for her and hide her away again. She walked. The cowhide had been carried behind her, twisted like rope, still faintly smoking from where it had fallen in the village square. No one dared touch it with bare hands. They used hooked sticks. They threw it into the center of the pit. Then they tried to throw her in too. The moment her feet reached the edge, the fire hissed. It did not spark. It did not flare. It recoiled. The flames that had danced red moments ago turned uncertain, blue at the edges as if something colder than fear had slipped inside. She will not burn, someone whispered. She must, said another, though his voice broke halfway through. Still they tried. Hands pushed her forward, but the ground beneath her shifted, slick with ash one moment, dry the next. She didn't slip. She didn't fall. Instead, the cowhide leapt up from the fire, as if called, and wrapped itself around her once more. But this time the skin burned blue. Not like dry wood, not like animal fat, but like river light catching a secret. And the smoke, it did not rise. Moved. Like a living thing, the smoke slithered, curled, wrapped itself around her neck, her arms, her legs. The scent of rot was gone. In its place was musk, earth, something primal and unshaped. The villagers screamed. They dropped their torches. One woman fainted. A child cried and called her mother cow, though he did not know why. Then she opened her mouth. She meant to say nothing. But something spoke. Her voice came layered, not in echoes but in harmonies. The sound of hide tightening. Of hooves striking dry earth. Of milk dripping from swollen teats. Of morning songs sung in circles long before her birth. The villagers could not make out the words. But they knew the meaning. She had been made wrong, they thought. Tied to rot and decay. Punished into beastliness. But now it was clear, she had been made to remember. The voice was not hers alone. It belonged to every animal skinned before its time. Every daughter silenced with salt and shame. Every mother called beast for birthing without beauty. Every ancestor buried beneath barns while others built homes on their bones. Her stepmother screamed. She mocks the gods. No, said the old man with the broken spine who had watched from the edge of the pit. She brings them back. One of the elders threw sand at her feet. Another spat. A third, a woman with long braids wrapped in copper wire, fell to her knees and began to chant. The chant was unfamiliar, but her tongue had waited years to remember it. The girl turned to her slowly and something behind her eyes shifted. A horned silhouette flickered in the firelight. Not outside her body. Inside. One horn curled toward the sun. The other broken. She blinked. Her step-siblings watched in silence. The eldest, the boy who once rubbed dung on her clothes, vomited in the dirt and begged not to be touched. The youngest, a girl no older than 4, reached for her hand. The smoke did not stop the child. The girl allowed it. Their hands touched. The smoke curled softly around both of them, and where their skin met, no fear lived. They called me Odiu, she said, her voice deeper now. Not aged, not hoarse, just deeper. But that is not my name. The silence that followed was loud. The village, once gathered in triumph and righteousness, now stood broken like splintered fence posts after a storm. No one moved to stop her as she stepped out of the pit. The flames did not burn her. They parted, flickering away like reeds in wind. Beneath her feet, the soil pulsed once more, not angrily, not violently, but alive. One of the young men ran for the shrine, shouting for the priest to come. But the priest had already gone, vanished into the woods an hour ago when the first blue smoke appeared. Another tried to cast salt behind her back. The salt turned black. Still she walked. Still the hide burned. It clung to her now not as punishment but as protection, draped around her shoulders like a cloak tailored by something older than time. It moved when she breathed. It pulsed when she paused. It whispered when she stared too long at the trees. "What are you?" someone cried. She tilted her head. "What you made. What you buried. What you feared." No one dared speak again. Behind her, the fire pit began to crumble. Not into ash but into soil, rich, dark, sweet-smelling. Flowers bloomed in it instantly. Yellow ones. White ones. The kind that grow in fields where cows once slept peacefully. She paused before leaving the pit. Her eyes found her father, half hidden behind a fig tree. He hadn't spoken all day. His eyes were red. Not from grief. Not from smoke. From shame. He opened his mouth but the smoke wrapped his throat. Gently. Silencing him without cruelty. She nodded once. That was enough. Her stepmother backed away, hands trembling. She whispered curses. Prayers. None stuck. The air around her daughter, stepdaughter, would not permit blasphemy now. The girl turned her back on the woman and walked toward the open field, smoke trailing behind her in ribbons. The wind followed. The moon rose higher. And above them all, somewhere far but near, a lowing sound echoed, deep, ancient, not quite human, not quite animal. It was the sound of a mother's call. A call long ignored. But now answered. And still she walked. The wind blew cold over her skin, but it no longer made her shiver. Not like before. Not like when she was 8 and the only thing touching her at night was wet hide and spit-laced laughter. Now there was something else in the air. A weight, a presence. She could feel them, not people, not animals, but the ones who came before. She didn't know what to call them, not exactly. But they breathed through her now and they were not quiet. When she opened her mouth that night after the smoke robe clothed her, it was not her own name she spoke. It was theirs. And not just names but sounds that were not human, long vowels cracked open like bones splitting, consonants ground like hooves over stone. The villagers ran. Even her stepmother, who always stood closest, shouting curses like spittle, she tripped over herself trying to escape. Her body glowed with faint blue lines, the same color as the flames that had refused her. The smoke had licked her skin and left behind marks, but not like burns. These were inscriptions. Curved and jagged, sharp as horn, soft as hide. They moved when she breathed. They shimmered when she stood still. And when she looked down at her arms and legs, she didn't see her body as it was before. The scars from whips, from nights spent curled and cold, they had shifted. They had become mouths. Not open and gaping, not grotesque. But mouths of memory. Each scar pulsed, murmured, whispered. Each blister that had once erupted from filthy hide now told a story in a tongue older than her village. They called to one another, to her. They weren't hers alone anymore. The beast she had dreamed of, the horned one, the one with her eyes, it no longer lived only in dream. It had stepped into her bones. And behind it, others followed. Whole herds. They came in silence, but their silence carried the weight of blood never mourned. Wasted deaths. Left to rot, forgotten in backyards and forests, in gutters behind meat markets. Skins flayed too early. Young calves choked without names. Mothers butchered with milk still hot in their bellies. None of them had been remembered properly. Until her. She was their vessel now. Their archive. The place where grief sat and did not fade. When she walked through the outskirts of the village, her bare feet silent on the dry grass, animals lowered their heads. Dogs whimpered and ran. Goats lay flat, not daring to breathe. And yet she brought no terror. Only return. Only justice. The girls in the village who had laughed at her now stared with wide eyes, not mocking but yearning. They had bruises too. Some on their legs, some on their voices. They came to her in the night, not daring to speak out loud. They left pieces of meat, pieces of old hide, bone necklaces. They whispered into the ground, hoping she would hear. And she did. Because now her ears were everywhere. The cowhide may have burned, but the spirit within it had only been released, stretched across the air like a net, clinging to whispers. Each time someone insulted her, it twisted and tugged at the air around them. Each time someone praised her quietly, it hummed with warmth. The beast inside her had many senses. Remembered everything. One of the butcher's sons threw a stone at her the next morning. She didn't even flinch. The stone stopped halfway through the air and dropped, split in two. The boy's nose began to bleed. No wind had touched him. No hand. But the scar on her left shoulder flared warm and she smiled without teeth. At night, she sat near the remains of the fire pit. The ash was no longer black, but blue-gray and soft as powder. Around her, the flies still buzzed, but they did not land on her anymore. They circled, hesitant, confused. She was not food. Not filth. She was shrine. The spirits of the beast spoke to her when she closed her eyes. They were not vengeful, not cruel. Only awake. Only remembering. And through her they would teach others how to remember too. She was no longer alone. The beast had daughters now.